Next, I'd like to introduce a new modeler for us, John Thomas Reynolds. I met John recently because of his scratch building with soda can cardstock. And I was really impressed with what he's doing and the material that he was using. So I've asked him to be here tonight to share his scratch building techniques with us. John, welcome.
Welcome, and how are you doing this evening?
Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm having a ball. Listening to some of the stuff, I've even got some new ideas already.
That's great. Well, listen, I'll turn it over to you and let you talk about your modeling and how you use this soda can material for your building materials.
Well, I got inspired by E.L. Moore years ago on being thrifty with my model work. So this is going to be an exercise in thrifty modeling. And yes, I use soda can boxes. And right now I'm building the floor for a station. As you can see, I'm putting in board by board construction, except my boards are cut from the soda can box. My tools, a cutting mat that is supposed to be self-healing. They are for a few months and then they cease to be self-healing. Simple single edge razor blades. I love those of you who can use X-Acto knives without ending them in your foot. The nice thing about razor blades, they don't roll. Very simple straight edge. And this is kind of what my work looks like. This is a restroom for the station that I'm building now. And board by board. With the frame from the soda can boxes, painted with cheap acrylic paints. And to stain my wood, I use Artist Loft from Michaels, felt tip pins, and good old Elmer's glue all, and Eileen tacky glue to hold everything together. And now, what questions do you have?
Well, I'd like to know how you cut it so thin with a razor blade.
First of all, I use the straight edge. So I'm cutting along the straight edge. This is an aluminum one. I usually use a steel one from good old Harbor Freight, but it doesn't matter. And I usually use the marks on the cutting mat because those give me nice scale 6-inch wide boards in 1/4-inch scale.
And John, I was interested in the floor when you held it up. It looked like you had stressed the wood or the cardboard, to look like stressed wood. It looks very nice.
Actually, the cardboard does that nicely on its own. And because they do not use the world's best cardboard, it accepts the alcohol-based stains from the pins in a distressed manner. It works out beautifully. Yeah, it should take me a couple of weeks to finish the station, but and this one will be 3x5, so I'll match the 3x5 card, which works out to about 12 feet by 20 feet in O scale, which makes it small, but it fits for small layouts, so we're good.
What got you involved with what got you involved with selecting the soda can cartons for your material?
A couple of things. Years ago, I was actually building an HO scale layout and I needed an engine house, but it was a small layout and there were no kits for an engine house. So I found a printout that I kind of liked, and that's how I started. And then it just grew from there. The first one, like any first attempt, fell under the category of disaster. But having seen what some other people could do with the material, I just kept on working and developing my own techniques over time.
Now, this soda can carton that you use, this is, what you're doing is you're taking the 12-pack Coke packaging and using that, right?
That's exactly what I'm using. And I'm using it to, like, for the floor, it gave me, by gluing two thicknesses together, I had a nice solid base that I'm now putting the floorboards on.
So the floorboards really give you 3 thicknesses by the time you're through with it.
4 thicknesses in this case, but yes. And 4 thicknesses also work out to a very nice scale wall thickness.
How do you
So it
brace
really works out.
how do you brace the inside of it, or do you use the same material for your bracing? How do you do that?
If you look at this one, which is small, all you're seeing is 4 thicknesses of that board to give me the walls. There is no bracing. And depending on how you set up your interiors, you really don't need it. It's remarkably stable. I've had it survive all sorts of weather that people tell me, oh, you're using cardboard? That won't survive. It has. They've gotten wet when I would have preferred they hadn't, and no issues.
You have any issues with painting the siding and stuff with the acrylic paints and warping?
Only if I haven't really glued everything solidly together, then I will get some warping. But at the thicknesses that I'm normally working with, by the time I've got everything all walled together and so on, I've not had any warping issues.
How do you cut your windows and door openings?
Measure them, mark them, use the razor blade, and slowly wear out the top of my forefinger as I keep running multiple passes.
Yeah, when you cut it, when you do it, you're doing what, 1 layer at a time?
Yes, I've tried cutting. You can go through about 2 layers, but after that, you're going to require either an X-Acto knife or something a lot more substantial in the razor blades. But I rather build the walls up layer by layer, because that also, as I glue the layers together and keep going through, that is also what keeps it from warping later.
So when you say you've got 4 thicknesses to your wall, that's 3 wall sections, and then the 4th is the layering of the individual wood?
Well, again, since I'm not using wood, like this one has a clapboard style finish,
Okay.
and I cut, in this case for the clapboards, I think I used just good old 3x5 cardstock, but I don't remember exactly. And but the others were all underneath, and then those were just layered on one by one.
So the 4 layers you're talking about, that's basically the structure, and then the clapboards or whatever else, that would be 3x5 cards. That's 3x5 cards or on different material.
It's still a card of one form or another, but yes. I've gone so far as to even build some structures. I don't have a model that I can show real quick, where I actually haven't used any solid walls. I've actually framed it up like you'd frame up a building, because it was meant to be looked at that way. And so far it's held together, which is remarkable.
And this, again, you make the lumber by the thin strips of the soda can box.
Absolutely.
And glue them together, and that gives you the right thickness.
Absolutely. For O scale, single thickness of the soda box comes out to about a scale 1 inch. So, you know, you can get 1x4, 1x6, 1 by whatever size you're looking for. If you double that thickness, of course, you've now got a 2 by whatever, and it just keeps on going. It's a great way to learn to scratch build, because if you don't like where you are, you can just toss it and start again, and you have the only thing you're out is a few cents worth of glue and however long you took at it.
Where do you get your plans?
Usually, if I can find, I'll either find a picture that inspires me or something else, and then I will either work directly, and sometimes I often work that first thickness, like when I build the station. The first thing that I will do is make my doors, which will be basically 2.5 by 6 scale foot, you know, standard door size. So that's what I'll do first. And then and then everything else works from there. And I cut those into the walls at first, and then just one right after the other. So I really don't use a lot of plans. I use a lot of pictures. This station I'm building was inspired by a station featured in Railroad Metal Craftsman about, I'm going to say, 3 months ago. And notice I said inspired by, because it gave me the idea, and then from there on, I'm on my own.
What period do you model, John?
In O scale, I model generally no later than the 1940s, maybe the very, very earliest of the 50s, but not much. I tend to like a little post-depression era, but not much. When I'm modeling an HO scale, it's anyone's guess from the 1930s to the 1970s. After that, I lose interest real quick.
What's the hardest structure you've built? What gave you the most trouble?
What gave me the most trouble was an O-scale engine house that I built with full interior framing and board by board on the outside. Because it's an engine house, you just, you know, when you look through the door, you're going to see what the framing looks like, so you can't cheat. And that really, that was a very challenging structure, and yet at the same time, very, very, very rewarding.
I have a quick question. When you're doing your some of the board modeling there, and you might need to make a curved board, such as like on a Rio Grande Southern station. Are you finding any tools or any method or technique very useful in bending like that single or maybe 2-ply board?
Haven't tried anything like that, so I'll let you know if I ever do run across something like that. I tend to keep things relatively straight, although I may get a little fancy with the ends for this station just for fun, just to see what I can come up with. That's one of the other things I like to do, is create little challenges for myself as I'm building things.
What do you mean?
Okay, like he just mentioned, a curved board. Well, it goes back to when I built the engine house, and I knew that I needed to frame up the walls the way a wall would be framed. That was a new challenge. That was something I had never done before. So it made the project a little more interesting, a little more fun. Since I'm working really without drawings, I use these mats, which are nicely marked. And I'll occasionally return to an old technique that I used when I built some model aircraft of just a chunk of board with a little wax paper on it on top of a quick sketch, but most of the time it's all free work.
John, what windows and doors do you use?
I started with castings, but now I cut my own out of, given all the things like lettuce and all the other stuff that come in those nice little plastic boxes from the supermarket, or if you're buying things that come in those wonderful, oh how we hate it, plastic coverings. If it's got a large enough area that I can make a window out of it, it becomes a window. And the same thing for doors. And then I just cut my little pieces of cardboard a little finer so that I get my detail, or I actually will scribe it and fill the scribe marks with paint.
So that would be for the mullions on the windows? You just scribe
For
it?
the mullions on the windows, scribe
That's
it.
how you do it.
Good old 1950s modeling in 2022. Yeah, I some of my techniques, I will admit, came out of HO Monthly and other things way back from the 1950s, when there really weren't all the nice little castings and other things that we have available today.
Of course, it's fun building like that.
Not only is it fun building, but it's remarkably thrifty. And what really got me going on way back when I basically didn't have any money to spare, this was a nice way to get buildings. There's some amazing kits out there, and I won't say there aren't. I'll just say my pocketbook wouldn't afford them most of the time.
I don't know if you've ever seen any rolling stock or engines, but my about 55 years ago, my uncle built a HO Pacific Electric, with the catenary and all. But he was. I remember him showing me when I was a kid, and he was just layering up cardstock. And what's really easy is embossing the rivets. And your top piece, you draw it, you cut it. If it looks good, you're ready to continue. Start embossing the rivets. And I think I still have that model around here somewhere in a box.
Yeah. Ancient Strathmore board. It's still available and still works. And I saw an article by, I think it was Bud Sema, who he was wanting a Mon Pa 280, and he took a Bowser kit and with wooden card made the model he wanted. So yeah, when your magazine collection goes back to 1949. Recreating some of that old stuff is really a lot of fun. And we've got some things that make the job easier now. And the fact that someone did it before you makes it a ton easier.
John, when you look at that photo and you start planning in your mind how you're going to build that model, for me, that's one of the real thrills of scratch building.
I absolutely agree. And for me, the way that I usually do it is I look at the photo, or occasionally I'll look at something else, look at a drawing from Narrow Gauge Shortline Gazette or something else, and just kind of keep the outline in mind. And the first thing I work on is the door, because that model of the door, before I do any of the rest on the walls, really sets the dimensions for everything else that will follow. And then it's all work it by eye and what looks right. And when you're working for what looks right, part of the hobby is just being an artist.
I couldn't agree more. That's why some of the great modelers were artists. Anybody have any more questions for John?
John,
It's
I'm
it's-
known that I'm known as the guy that models with paper and card. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is a paper and card building. We model much the same way. The only difference is I don't like to paint. So I use the computer and textures to do my paint work.
believe it or not, I actually started with a couple of printout paper kits, and then after I'd gotten the basic techniques down, building those kits and reading tutorials and looking for videos and anything else that I could on how to make those more realistic, then I kind of went heading off my own direction.
Well, I designed my own also. And if you can send me an email, or if you can send me your email address, I'd be glad to send you a model that you could look at and play with and do however you want. Ask questions or
What's your email?
Paul Egri Jr., PaulegrijR at gmail.com.
Don't do it. Don't do it. He'll trap you in.
Bites your
At
tongue- bites your tongue like
gmail.com. Okay. Actually, I think we have, I think I've run across some of your stuff before. Your name looks familiar, sounds familiar.
It's been around. There was an engine house build right here on New Tracks that Dave Rarick did that I designed.
All right.
And if you look at the New Tracks stuff on YouTube, you can find those videos.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. But yeah, so I thought I recognized that.
And
Yeah,
don't listen to Clark.
Oh, it's all in good fun anyways.
I got a short question for you. Do you have a way of modeling brick?
Not yet.
Okay,
Brick is the one thing that I choose to, I usually use some sort of printed out texture.
Now, are you just doing buildings or have you also done rolling stock?
I have done rolling stock. I actually started my freelance building, my freelance building with rolling stock. And it was a good early effort, but I can do so much better now. There have been three things that I hear too often about the hobby, and I've heard them since the 1970s, so they're not new. And that's either I don't have room, I don't have time, or it costs too much. Well, I got into micro layouts because that solved the I don't have room. And I got into building my own rolling stock and everything else because that solved the I don't have money. And the more you practice, well, pretty soon the you don't have time is just an excuse also.